Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Strickland from JLS Consulting. For those of you who are not here this morning, welcome to the third of our aviation series at this year's Arabian Travel Market 2017. I'm really pleased to say that we've got the CEO with us today of an airline that has hit the headlines for very challenging reasons in recent years, has gone through very tough times and indeed a good deal of tragedy. But I think now we're seeing that it's picking itself up and moving things in a much more positive direction. Now, the airline I'm talking about is Malaysia Airlines, and the CEO who I'm about to introduce is a battle-hardened industry veteran. He's worked in the travel industry. He's worked for Ryanair, which is the largest and most successful low-cost airline in Europe, and indeed, in many respects, the largest and most successful airline in the world. So we're going to interview Peter Bellew, who's CEO of Malaysia Airlines. So please give him a nice, warm welcome. Peter Bellew. Peter, welcome to the Arabian Travel Market. I think it's your first time here, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, what a great venue and super city to have it. I think there's a great buzz around the event. So I think people are actually doing business rather than partying, which is what they do at many of the other events.
Many travel shows.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been at Malaysia? You went did you go from Ryanair to
Yeah,
Malaysia?
straight to. So I'm there since August 2015, and I went to Malaysia Airlines as Chief Operating Officer. So, thought I'd do something nice and quiet and straightforward and simple. No challenge after being in Ryanair. And then unfortunately, my colleague, my good friend and colleague, Christoph Muller, had been CEO, and he decided to move on. He sort of left relatively quickly. I thought he might stay longer, but he dumped me. So I was left on my own, and for a few months they were looking for a CEO. And then they had the crazy idea that I would be the right guy to fill the shoes. So, I ended up as CEO of Malaysia Airlines.
So an unexpected development. You didn't go out there with that in mind?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I would say accidental CEO in a way. And had never been my life's ambition to be a CEO of an airline, but fate can play you an unusual hand. So, but I'm really enjoying it. Wonderful country, massive challenges, but we're making good progress.
Now, that's what I saw in terms of preparing for the interview for today. I mean, if we just touch briefly on the two tragedies, there was the MH370, MH17. One, we know exactly what happened in terms of deliberate action to bring that flight down. MH370, in brief, I think there's no definitive news yet. Pieces of aircraft wreckage have been found, haven't they? But there's nothing more detailed to report.
Yeah, no, they're not, and that creates its own challenges for us every day. Mm-hmm. There's a different perspective when you work in the company. If we park the business bit of it for a minute, I work with people every day who lost some of their best friends, who lost some of their colleagues, who lost people who they were in a relationship with. So it doesn't leave the people in Malaysia Airlines ever, and there isn't a day that somebody doesn't raise it or talk about it internally. So in a human way, it's a very real thing that lives with us. The fact then that 370, that there hasn't been any conclusion to it, does make that all the harder. But on a human level, it's just still there. But there's another element to that also. There hasn't been a group of employees in any airline in the world that has been through what Malaysia Airlines has been through. And I do think it's created a rod of steel in the back of many of the people there, because not only had they the two tragedies, 6,000 of their colleagues lost their jobs, they've had significant changes to their terms and conditions. Even in the last couple of months, everybody's having to work a lot harder because we've changed the productivity of the way we're running the airline. But out of that actually comes an intensity and a work ethic and a willingness to see the job through, to get this thing fixed, to get it turned around, to make the airline the pride of the nation again. And when you have a group of people almost on a mission like that, it changes the whole scope of the way things happen day to day. People are often doing things because they feel they have to prove the rest of the world wrong and move on from there. And it's quite an intense experience working amongst that.
Well, I wonder there if your own experience at Ryanair has been of particular help to you, because Ryanair, as I mentioned, is a successful, extremely successful airline, and in some ways against the odds, because coming from a you could say, a small country on the edge of Europe, and certainly the CEO, Michael O'Leary, likes to play that up. Just, I think he says, just a bunch of paddies, the nickname for you might use for an Irishman. But he, against all odds, he's made that company successful. Do you think that's giving you personally extra drive to help the company move forward? You've been through the dynamics of working for them and seen what it took to succeed.
I think the experience that you pick up in Ryanair about managing costs and about attention to detail and about how the smallest detail can have the biggest impact on an airline on a day-to-day basis, and also dealing with pressure and stress and rapid growth and rapid change, that's been of huge help to me. But it is a very different business. Asia is a completely different world to Europe and America. In fact, almost everything is different. The operational challenges are significantly different, even down to weather and political. We've done a scenario of what are we going to do if war breaks out in North Korea, and we've everything prepared around that. Now, we never had to do anything like that in Ryanair.
No.
Long haul is very different. Operating premium 5-star business class is extremely different. But the biggest difference for me, I think, is culturally. When I went to Malaysia Airlines as Chief Operating Officer, I went with my Ryanair head on me. I went with cutting costs, barking out orders, telling people that this is the road or you take the other road, a very abrupt way of dealing with things. I realized very quickly within a few weeks in Malaysia Airlines that actually they didn't need that most people were very well experienced. They probably knew what to do. Maybe they hadn't had the leadership of the past, but also the airline was under some distress, and people were actually visibly upset on many occasions, but close to tears. I had to change my own approach, a lot more of putting the arm around people, telling people you're wonderful, you're doing a great job, but we just changed one thing this week, maybe can we try and get that done? And so for me, it was a big change, actually, to try and get my head around it. Then in Malaysia, they've got a most fabulous intermingling of cultures. You've got the Islamic Malays, you've got Buddhist Chinese, you've got Hindu Indians, all Malaysian people. They're all trying to work together, and they are quite harmonious. But these are considerations, again, that you didn't have to get your head around in Ryanair, where we just did what we wanted to, whenever we wanted to, how we wanted to.
Well, I mean, coming in as an Irishman, a European, how do you manage your way through that really complex cultural jigsaw you described? I mean, are there people around you saying, Peter, you need to understand this is the way one group of Malays would see it, but another group might see it differently? Are people helping you with that so you don't
No, I didn't really have
sensitivities?
I didn't really have anybody helping me, because I actually don't think anybody could understand what I was saying for about the first 3 months.
Because of the Irish accent.
I got an Irish accent and I talked too fast, and they were probably in shock even having to deal with me personally anyway, at the speed I was trying to change things. The only way I found for me that you could deal with it was actually to try, and they have a phrase in Malaysia called turun padang. It's to go down to the people. So I did shifts in the baggage hall, I did service on the aircraft, I worked in the hangar during the night, I worked in the operations centre at night. That was the only way I could get my head around what people were doing, where they were coming from it. Also then, once the colleagues saw that you actually gave a damn about what they were doing, and that you wanted to try and understand that the way they did it, and that you weren't laying down the law too much, then people would start to do what you asked them to do when you asked them to do it. And we're very lucky. Like Malaysia Airlines had a very good reputation for 40 years, vastly experienced people. So the change that's been happening over the last 12 months and the good things that have come out of it are actually from a lot of people in their late 50s. So some of the most important people in the transformation are 57, 58, 59. They've just got a couple of years left. In most situations, people like that probably normally wouldn't give a damn, and they're just counting the clock until they get out the door. But this is a case of national pride, and people want to make this thing a great success. They want to make it the pride of the nation again. So, culturally, it's been a very interesting challenge for me, but hey, you learn a lot about yourself doing these things.
And what about the political angle? Because I remember I did speak with Christoph Muller in the time he'd become CEO and you joined the team. And again, he was someone who had been seen as very direct and straightforward, you could say German characteristic in other airline jobs he'd had. So what's it like navigating the political tightrope? I imagine, again, that's something you didn't have to do in Ryanair. Michael O'Leary is known for saying exactly what he thinks of people, no matter what they think.
The approach I've taken actually with our shareholder, which is the Malaysian Government Sovereign Wealth Fund, is rather than a them and us situation, we've actually embedded about 20 of their staff into Malaysia Airlines now over the last 9 months. Okay. So they literally are attending most of the meetings. I've had them on IATA courses, they're going on CAA courses, they're going on safety courses. We're bringing them up to speed. So rather than them saying, well, once every quarter, well, why didn't you do it this way, that way, the other way? They're with us living through it. That I have found has taken out a whole level of discussion, bureaucracy or misunderstanding that we may have been faced with. That model works for me. It wouldn't work for every CEO because some people like to do the whole thing their way and not tell people what's going on. But for me personally, it seems to be working quite well. And we've had great support from the shareholder. They're learning as it goes on. In a few years' time, there'll be a Malay running the Malaysia Airlines. They'll probably have great support then of the shareholder who will understand the business, because they're making a big effort, our shareholder, to understand the business. But you can only do that if you bring them into the tent. Yeah. So, they're throwing food out of the tent rather than throwing it into the tent at us, and that seems to be working well.
I mean, I've heard of politicians being involved in an airline before, but I've never heard of people being brought into the business day to day, like you're describing. It sounds like they will certainly get a much better
I'm not sure it has happened before, and interestingly, the Sovereign Wealth Fund would be saying maybe this is a thing that they'll start doing in other of their sectors. Investments, because it probably, in a way, will breed management that will be able to come up through the ranks over the next 10, 15 years as well. Okay.
Now, in terms of the actual fleet you operate, I mean, I think one of the things that Christoph had led was a slimming down and a simplification of fleet. But I've read recently you're looking now to acquire aircraft again. So just tell us about the planned new aircraft coming. You can get A350s from later this year, the 737 MAX coming in on the short haul fleet. What does that mean?
So we've really got two distinct businesses, or possibly even three. We've got an ultra long haul service to London twice a day with an A380. We have 6 aircraft, 4 of which are needed for that. A couple of those aircraft, one goes every day to Saudi Arabia on the pilgrimage work. So that's one relatively small business, although London is an expensive operation. We have a thriving and currently very successful international and regional business that runs from Japan, China, India, right the way down to New Zealand and Australia and into Sri Lanka. And that business is doing extraordinarily well at the moment. We've had a massive rebound in traffic. We have 15 A330s at the moment operating on that. And then we're also stretching 737-800s are flying to places on missions that they were never, ever designed to do. But Malaysia Airlines is stretching them out there, sometimes with big load constraints. So I don't have enough wide-body aircraft to cope with that business at the moment because it's growing very, very strongly.
Well, but just putting that in context, then why did Malaysian dispose of its remaining 777s if now you're going to have to go back down that track?
The 777s we had were they were past their best.
Right. Okay.
They were like a cabaret singer who had fallen out of the charts, and she wasn't going to have a big hit and needed significant plastic surgery. So they were in a very tired state. They had very low seat density, and the lease rates on them were incredibly high. That the latter being the biggest sin of all. So they just weren't fit for purpose. We have 54 737-800s. So the mix of fleet is wrong right now. We really need to have somewhere around 30-35 wide bodies, probably 35 or 40 narrow bodies to operate the feed. We're looking for, right now, to put in place for next year, we're looking for 6, 7 or 8 second-hand A330s. that they will literally go on to routes such as, at the moment, we're mostly narrow body on Hong Kong, on Bali. We used to operate 3 times a day with a 777 full to Bali. We're operating 737s during the night to India, completely packed out all the time. We got our second slot back in Shanghai. We've had to stick a 737 in that. So it's not terribly risky. All I'm actually doing is just altering the size of the number of seats that's available. The lease rates have come down dramatically in the last 18 months on second-hand A330s and also on second-hand 777s. So we're looking for next year for, as I say, 6 or 7 A330s and a similar amount for the following year, and we're doing an evaluation at the moment. Lease rates have come down significantly on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old 777s, and 777-300 ER at the right price could offer us a very, very cost-effective platform to operate to Australia, New Zealand, some of the routes in North Asia, and even to look at going back direct into some of the routes we moved out of in Europe. The lease rates we would be paying probably in late 18 or 19 for 777s are half the lease rates Malaysia Airlines was paying when they retired the 777s in January 2016. So suddenly economics start to make sense again. We've got 6 A350s coming. The first delivery should have been in this October. I hope they will arrive. But I do believe His Excellency Al Bakr will get his 350s before I get mine. Right. So I expect we will be delayed probably until 10 to midnight on the 31st of December to get my A350s this year. And we will have 6 in place by next May 2018. They will principally go on the London route. They will replace the A380s. We're taking the A380s out and we're moving them into a dedicated unit that will initially focus on the Hajj and Umbra traffic.
Yeah, I want to come on to that in just a moment. I just want to ask you that. I mean, if the 350 is going to come on to London,
yep.
That, I guess, is a capacity fall versus the 380.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Is that you will take less connecting traffic, let's say the old tried and tested UK-Australia traffic? Or?
You see, the problem is the business has gone so well over the last 6 months that we never expected to operate for most of the month of April 2017 at 93 and 94% load factor on London.
On London.
Because May 2016 we operated at 40% load factor on
40
London. 40.
Wow.
So in a year there's been a dramatic change. So a year ago, A350s, 380s being retired, that made perfect sense. And we were only gasping at the chance to downsize the equipment. But fortunately, with the rebound of the business and the very aggressive sales and marketing tactics we've been using, we've seen a massive recovery on the London route and on many other routes as well. It's actually not very sophisticated stuff we're doing. It's kind of traditional, old-style 1980s, 1990s airline marketing, but it's working very well for us at the moment. And we operated the month of January, 81% load factor, 80% in February, 79 in March, will be 83 in April. The month of December just passed, we did a load factor of 90% across the network. That was the highest load factor of any full-service carrier in the world, higher than Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific, American Airlines, British Airways, anybody else. We had the highest load factor. That's been really interesting for the company and for the staff. If you go back to May 16 and we were 40% load factor on London, and you come just a few months later to December 16 and we're at 90% across the network, staff in May 16 were very worried would they have a job in December. Staff in December 16 were complaining continuously that they can't use their ID90 subload staff travel tickets. So the biggest complaint I have to deal with at the moment is not I want more pay or more time off. It's I can't use my concession tickets because the flights are full. So that has been an interesting change for us. But we're getting great support from all over the world on the services. And what it's proven to us is there's nothing wrong with the Malaysia Airlines brand. There's nothing wrong with the logo. There's nothing wrong with the name. You don't get to load factors like that, and you don't get to passenger number growth like that unless people are satisfied with your brand.
No, and is some of that maybe Ryanair experience, because Ryanair in recent years has pushed their own load factors up, been very aggressive. Is that something you brought with you to focus more on filling the seats?
I think one of the jobs I got chucked out of operations by Michael O'Leary for a year and got put into sales and marketing. I think on the basis I was one of the few people who had a suit and a tie in the airline at the time. But there's nothing wrong with talking to the media, that sells tickets. There's nothing wrong with doing old-fashioned advertising. So in terms of Malaysia Airlines, there was a big debate and question about, will we change the brand, change the logo, change the whole thing? While that had been going on, there was actually very little sales and marketing happening. But we'd done some other stuff that didn't make any sense. We're a full-service carrier, and we had really, really upset the travel trade. We had been going out of our way to try and sell a lot of our tickets directly through the website. We were undercutting on the website the fares we had available on the GDSs, and that is a thing people do. Now they think it's clever. It's not clever in Asia. 99% of all business travel in our part of the world is booked through travel agents. Travel agents are actually still very, very important. In Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, China, Indonesia, even in Australia, actually, they're much more prevalent than they are in Europe or the US. Second week I got the job, I spent a huge amount of time. I went to visit the top 14 travel agents. I apologized to them for what we'd done, and we put the fares up on the website, and we equalized them with what was on their GDSs. They've come back in droves actually to us. The media, there had been very little contact with the media by Malaysia Airlines, and little transparency. We've changed that around. We're reporting quarterly reports now. I think the detail we normally put out in our quarterly reports would be very, very similar to a quoted company on the NASDAQ or the London Stock Exchange. We don't report full profit and loss or balance sheet, but actually if you do the maths, we give you the passenger numbers and we give you the average fare so you can work it out for yourself. That's been very important, the engagement with the media. That's helped rebuild the brand around the world. And then we did change some of the pricing strategy, but more importantly, we did very old-fashioned advertising. Press advertising still works in Asia. Traditional, black and white or colour ads in newspapers. Yeah. Radio works very well. I believe these media also work very well here in the Gulf, people tell me. And we did a little bit of TV and a lot of very old-fashioned interviews with newspapers, and that's what we did. It's not rocket science, but it's just a matter of consistently doing it.
But, I opened up by saying that Malaysia Airlines, it was challenged even before the tragic elements, and many people question whether it did have a future, whether it could survive. But if we look at some of the household names in Asia with reputations for quality service, Singapore Airlines, or in particular Cathay Pacific. Cathay seems to be almost in crisis now. I think the first loss in I don't know how long.
Yeah.
And it's as if they're in a paralysis. Suddenly things are happening around them. The CEO again has just changed. Is it in some ways almost reversing that Malaysia, who was being seemingly left behind, is now you're firing on all cylinders and passing these other guys who've had the better
maybe we're the first that's been gone through the big turnaround. Right. Maybe others are going to have to follow. But, it's not easy, and it's not easy for people to bite the bullet and make the tough decisions and do the hard things. Christoph did in a very short space of time, did a lot of heavy lifting around that. But the other part of it is, I think there's a little bit too much Me Too, also sometimes with some of the bigger carriers. A lot of the business strategies that work in Asia, that work in the States or work in Europe, they don't work in Asia. So premium economy generally has been a nightmare for the carriers that have introduced it in Asia.
Why is that?
Because as soon as premium economy money comes in, all of the big banks, all of the big oil companies, and all the big companies said, right, new travel policy. If premium economy is available now, you're not allowed travel and business anymore. Right. So you actually completely destroyed your business cabin and your business cabin revenue. You cannibalized your own average yield. You annoyed ultimately the customer who's sitting in the seat because they got a substandard product. And in Asia, people are willing to put up with very, very, very low-cost carriers with a very basic level of service, or else they want something quite posh and luxury. The in-between thing doesn't really wash in Asia. There is a certain level of status among a lot of people. A lot of people who are traveling in business class, they want to be in front of a curtain. They don't want to be down the back with a bunch of other people. And if that's what they want, that's really what you should give them. A lot of talk with the carriers in Asia at the moment, the full-service carriers. We're going to start unbundling. We're going to start doing this and that. I think that will be an absolute disaster because, again, people either want cheap and cheerful or they want something really, really nice and posh and old-fashioned with a bit of glamour and a bit of style. But I think you will see the transformations that will happen in some of the other places. They will be half-hearted. They won't really go the full hog, but we'll see.
Because again, maybe a driver is you talk about the cheap and cheerful. Malaysia has had that intense low-cost competition for a long time.
Yes.
With your fellow Malaysian carrier AirAsia and AirAsia X long haul, which although it hasn't made very much money to date, but I think it's just for the first time made a small amount of money in the last year, but it's growing. Yeah. We see Singapore Airlines, who's brought it in the stable, low-cost carrier of Scoot. Yeah. So you've had to deal with that. That's going on. But do you think you would look at setting a low-cost arm up of your own?
No,
or do you
I don't think so.
I
think the way for us to go. I think in Asia, you're either really cheap, and you have to be ultra cheap, or you have to be really good. I don't actually think there's a middle ground. There's very few models ever of a full-service carrier setting up a successful low-cost carrier. Everybody talks about it, everybody says they're going to do it, but they tend to be wishy-washy, half-assed attempts at doing it, and they generally end up in the thing getting closed or sold or whatever. Yeah. So that's been the history. I've watched it play out over the last 20 years, so that's been the way it's gone. Then you get sometimes a full-service carrier that has too much reverence for the upstart low-cost carrier. In Malaysia Airlines case, for 9 years, AirAsia paid $8 American and 25 cents less per passenger to use the KLIA2 or the other terminal than Malaysia Airlines paid. As most people in the audience know, most airlines are lucky to make $4 per passenger profit. So I worked very hard straight away as I got the job to try and get that equalised, and we have it pretty much equalised now. So a significant cost advantage they had over me has evaporated in the last 6 months. I've seen that too many times. Either full-service carriers treat the low-cost carriers as a joke. We saw that all the time in Ryanair. We used it to our advantage. We'd sneak into a country and you're seeing it playing out today in Alitalia. Yes. Ryanair has nearly 40% market share now in Italy.
I think Ryanair's the biggest airline individual, isn't it?
Ryanair actually is the only airline that flies to most of the regional smaller towns and cities in Italy. In fact, if Alitalia closes down, which I hope it doesn't, because it's a wonderful airline with a great heritage, but if they do, I don't think there's going to be so much uproar in Italy, because they generally fly rich people from Milan and Rome on long-haul flights or to nice places in Northern Europe. They don't tend to fly very many real Italian people round from their smaller towns up to wherever. Or if they do, they don't do it very well. Yes. So that's the dichotomy, but I don't see it would be a good strategy for us to set up a low-cost arm.
And just back, I forgot to come back to what you already mentioned, the 380s in your fleet, this interesting idea that the 380 is going to come off London and form this Hajj Umbra unit, given we're in the part of the world where that's where people are coming. And I know you were in the audience today, you heard Jan Albrecht talk about Hajj and Umbra traffic. Are you confident that's going to work? Because as he was saying this morning, Hajj is only a certain part of the year, but is there going to be enough scale, you think, with Umbra traffic, which is most of the year, to use those aircraft effectively?
The Hajj and the Umbra are incredibly special things. Okay, so I'm an Irish Catholic, and we do some pilgrimage to Lourdes, or we go to a place called Loch Durg, and we go for a few days. And to my colleagues who work in Malaysia Airlines and people I've met in Malaysia, people save for their whole lives to go on the Hajj. And for many people, it's the highlight of their whole life, right? It's up there even almost above family or on an equal footing. So the Hajj is constrained by the limits of the time and the scale of it. So the Umbra, which is a different experience, but visits some of the same places generally, it now has actually grown to about 8 or 9 months of the year. And the Saudi government has put in place very solid building blocks to put in all the infrastructure around that to make the Umbra experience a wonderful one for pilgrims to go and visit. We sponsor 70 or 80 of our own employees to go to the Hajj every year, and I went to see them off last northern summer when they were going, and one of my colleagues who I've become quite close with. And it's only till you're there and you see the whole family seeing them off, and everybody's in tears and everybody's very emotional, or the joy people get when they're going on the Umbra, and the crew tell you that it is the happiest flight you will ever work on is when you're flying people or working as a cabin crew on board the aircraft, going there and coming back, because people are just filled with a sense of joy and excitement about the trip. So when I got my head around that, and we were looking at the A380s, we were talking about selling them, we were talking about what would we do with them. But the secondary market's not proven for the aircraft yet, because they're all generally quite young. This business has been growing. My view on the A380 totally changed last year when we started doing the heavy seat maintenance checks on the aircraft. I crawled around the aircraft personally because they're all scaffolded in the hangar and it's beside my office. I don't know what they were doing when they built the aircraft. I think they must have thought they were going to become military battleships because they are built so strong. I think the level of construction is similar to the 707s that are still flying over 50 years later in America at the moment. So I think the plane will last. The plane, I think, was totally misused. I don't think that plane was ever really designed for having showers and bars and snooker tables or whatever else people are putting in apartments at the moment. Of course, that's cool, but that's not what the plane was about. It was about 650 or 700 people with 8 hours moving people on mass transit. So that's what we're going to do with the plane. We're going to refit it on a flexible configuration, 700 seats all economy, or a mixed 635 economy and business. The aircraft will start getting refitted starting next June 2018. We hope to have them all finished by around about March 19. So some of them will be ready for the Hajj season, the Umbra season of next year, and then progressively we'll have a full fleet of 6 available. The interesting bit for me around this is, now that we've got very close to actually having the aircraft reality, I'm starting to get very significant real requests for people outside the Hajj and the Umbra to wet lease the aircraft for a year or two to provide mass transit, particularly from parts of China and other parts of Asia, who are trying to move big movements of holiday tourists around, and there isn't runway capacity, there isn't the slots, or the seat rate. If you put 700 seats on an A380 and you have the right cost structure around it, the seat rate becomes very, very attractive around the aircraft. So it'll provide a very cost-effective solution for Hajj and Umbra traffic. And I personally believe there's probably a new business model around 650, 700 seat A380 all-economy aircraft in many, many parts of the world that you or I can't conceive of.
Think about.
But the kind of kids that come up with Uber, PayPal, Airbnb, etc., they'll be the ones that'll come up with the model.
Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, I just did a short presentation before this about the outlook for the industry. And I was talking about the A380, indeed met somebody here from Airbus as well. The challenge that, on the one hand, Emirates has been their salvation by the amount of orders they've put in place, but maybe you're going to be a different kind of salvation. you could be the torch holder for a new lease of life.
I think it'll prove the secondary market for the aircraft, and it is an amazing aircraft, much misunderstood and probably much misused, and not used for the purposes it was really built for. Although it is very cool to have a shower at 40,000 feet.
Yeah, I haven't had one myself, I must admit, but enjoy it while you can. And just another thing in terms of the market, the Chinese market, you're going to China in a big way.
I wish I was 20 years younger.
Yeah. Why is that?
So at the moment, the Chinese population, very few people have passports. Still very few people have passports. So they've set a target of approximately another 12% of the population to get a passport within the next 10 years. That's another 120 million people. Malaysia, and particularly the parts of Malaysia, the states of Sabah and Sarawak that are in Borneo, they're generally only 3.5 hours flying time from many secondary and main Chinese cities. Malaysia is practically the only country, 30% of the population of Malaysia generally speaks Chinese. In some parts, it's higher. Every street corner in Malaysia, you get Chinese food. For some reason, Malaysians often put curry sauce on it, but that's just personal taste. People in Malaysia, they love Chinese people. Everybody in Malaysia has got Chinese friends and family, went to school with Chinese people. So culturally, when the Chinese visitors come in a group of 50 or 100, people in Malaysia are quite happy to see them coming, and they don't get upset by it. I think the tourism growth from China to Malaysia will be off the charts. I wish I was 20 years younger and I'd be building holiday resorts, water parks and airports to try and service this thing, because it's just a no-brainer. And I think Malaysia Airlines will do very well out of it over the next 10 years. And I think a number of the other carriers will also. We obviously have the shadow of MH370. That had a significant impact on the company's reputation in China. I spoke at the Roots World event in Chengdu back last autumn, and very publicly apologized for what had happened. And the Chinese authorities actually were tremendous. They have said that they've rolled out the welcome. They've said to us that the first airline that flew to many cities in China when the country opened up over 30 years ago was Malaysia Airlines, and they've welcomed us back to the cities, and they're going out of their way to help us get new routes started up. We're starting up 11 new routes to China this year. It's the largest new route expansion by the airline in its history, and anything we've opened up to date is doing extremely well, where the bookings are very solid.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because of the cultural links you described and familiarity with each other's cultures, that would be easier for, say, European carriers, because you mentioned Chengdu. I mean, as a massive but secondary city in China, is a route that British Airways opened up to London and gave up because it wasn't working after 3 years. But I guess the dynamics are different for reasons you've said.
But 200 people can get in a plane from Chengdu, come to Malaysia, they get off the plane, everybody's delighted to see them.
Yeah.
A third of the people they meet on the street can give them directions in Chinese.
Right.
They get their own food, and if they're all making a lot of noise and getting excited, the Malaysians join in and enjoy it. Yeah. So it's a different experience.
Much more home, really.
Yeah. It reminds me of, in a European context, Malaysia is probably a bit like where Malaga was 40 years ago, or Tenerife was 40 years ago. Right. Europeans had just started package holidays. Yes. When they went, they wanted to find a British pub or a German pub or an Irish pub, and they were looking for somewhere that was vaguely familiar, but they didn't want to go more than 3 hours flight time or 4 hours flight time. I think Malaysia is the Algarve and the Costa del Sol of China.
Of the Chinese travelling public. What about just talking about a couple of points on partnerships? You're a member of One World. Is that valuable to you? I was asking Jan this morning, what do you think about future alliances? He was still very upbeat. Is that something that you reflect on?
Well, we have many wives, because we have co-chairs with Qatar, with Emirates, and with Etihad. Yes. So we're the Switzerland of Asian airlines, I think. Right. So we get on with everybody. One World, I think, has got new management. I think that Robert's done a great job. I think that's going to get some traction, and we're going to become a very, very active partner. I think the point he made this morning was very well made. you only get out of these things actually the hard work you put into them.
You've got to get to a gym, not just be a member of a gym.
And we didn't do enough work, and we're starting to work much closer with our One World partners, and it is paying off very well. And it does give you the exposure, particularly for our company that's relatively small compared to some of the rest of them. It just does get your brand visibility in places that you wouldn't get otherwise. But with each individual route and in each individual partner, you have to work at it very hard, and we hadn't been doing that in the past, and that's something that we're increasingly doing. I think part of what we're finding now is success does breed success in the aviation business, airline business. And everybody else is watching what we're doing, and now that things are going better, they're more inclined to pick up the phone and say, you know, can we buy 50 seats a day off you going to Bali? Can we, you know, do this, that, or the other with you? So it's a confidence game, you know, the airline business, and we're getting our own confidence back, and other people are getting more confident in us. So I think we have a good relationship with Emirates, a good agreement there, and as I say, we do business with lots of people.
Well,
in the region.
What about the importance of this region? I mean, I was going to ask you. You mentioned you have co-chairs with, I think you said, all three of the big Gulf airlines.
Yeah.
When I got on my flight to come out here yesterday in Birmingham, UK, actually, I think the first logo I saw was MH and the logo for that flight.
And it's working very well. I think what we will have to do, and it does take years. It's not an overnight thing. I think we're going to have to get much better at marketing ourselves and our product, and actually the country of Malaysia, back through those networks, which is something we haven't done for the longest time. And I think there is an ability there. Wherever we've done that over the last 9 or 10 months, it's paid off very, very, very quickly. We get an increasing number of visitors now in Malaysia from this part of the world. There's the most incredibly interesting halal food in Malaysia that you don't get actually here, and they really love coming to Malaysia. The shopping's cheaper, and it's a great fun destination. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us here. And this is a great event. Like you can sense the vibrancy that's here. There's people actually really doing business here. I was talking to many of the participants on the Malaysian tourism stand here, and they told me they've done far more business here than they did at World Travel Market. So you better not tell the Reed people that. But
they might be listening here in the room.
So,
and in terms of general challenges in the world, I mentioned this again to Jan. You're a veteran of the industry.
Yeah.
I hate that expression veteran because we're all veterans, but it is a particularly challenging time, isn't it? You know, whether it's security challenges.
Yeah, if veteran, it makes me sound like I'm going to have to be wheeled off in a wheelchair or something.
Bring you on a walking stick.
So I think, you know, when you're 30 years in the business, oil goes up, oil goes down. Dollar goes up, dollar goes down. You know, you have Trump, you have the Bushes, you have whatever, right? You have Gulf Wars, you have hopefully not a war in Korea, right? But stuff just happens. You just got to go with what's there. You try and mitigate the risk around it as best you can. I do think it's a very interesting time in Asia at the moment. Unless you're living there and you're living in it, you don't realise the vibrancy and the rapid pace of growth. Even since I'm there just less than 2 years, I've seen significant changes. And the mindset, I think, from the Gulf over to India, right the way over to China and Japan, down to Australia, New Zealand, back over to Southeast Asia and up. There's enough business actually in that whole area that all of us don't have to do much business anymore with Europe or America. We've had some very arrogant talk from the European Commission about the Gulf carriers, some of it quite ridiculous and even racist in its tone, I believe, some of the way that they've been carrying on. That's spilled over actually into the Asian carriers, where they're saying, well, we're putting restrictions on the Gulf carriers, we're going to create restrictions on you. The reaction I've seen from my peers, because I'm the only non-Asian who's a CEO of a, there'll be somebody now in Cathay, but I have been the only non-Asian who's a CEO. I sit at committee meetings. My Asian colleagues are thinking, why would I bother flying to Europe or even starting new routes to the States if I think I'm going to have hassle doing it? There's enough business for me in Australia, operating 787s, my new equipment non-stop, direct places, or I can just move around in the region. There's enough business there. So there's a kind of an insularity there in the much bigger region where people are saying, hey, chaos in Europe, chaos in America, we've enough business between ourselves. And that's if you actually look at route development over the last 12 months, you'll see all of the route development is happening, within that cross-axis.
I think it's very interesting, as you say, in terms of airlines are planning networks. I remember since we've had the new US administration and there's all talk about what was that going to mean for the American relationship with China, I read an article that showed you what the trading relationships were in the world, which countries were number one in terms of the US was the biggest partner and which were number one with China. And China was 2/3 of the map with China, 1/3 USA. So I think your point is extremely important for anybody who may be listening in maybe political circles, that the world outside of Europe and Asia could quite happily look after itself, and increasingly so, and do more without even touching those areas if it's going to be difficult.
Like many business things in Malaysia are far better organised than they are in Great Britain or Ireland. The banking system is greatly superior. IT, generally broadband penetration, quality of mobile phone signals, online banking, online payments, competitiveness of productivity. Many things are actually far superior. I didn't realise that myself actually until I've been living there. So there's a kind of a bias that people in Europe and the States have around that.
And what about the specific of the laptop ban? That's not hitting you directly.
No, it's not hit us directly, and then probably in a strange way, it's probably been a benefit to us, because I think we've seen definitely an uptick very rapidly in Malaysia from inbound tourism growth from the Gulf, from India, from places, and I know many customers I speak to. America now is completely off the wish list of places to visit. In fact, we've come across quite a number of customers who've cancelled trips, people who are not Muslims or are not subject to any bans, but they're just saying it's just too much hassle and not travelling. So I think that probably has been of benefit to us. But I think it is doing huge damage, to some of my colleagues and some of the other airlines. They are losing some big yield around the place at the moment.
And another issue in terms of capacity, your part of the world is a growing market or multiple markets, but airport capacity is at a premium. So while some of your competitors are struggling with new competition dynamics, equally they don't have much airport capacity anyway. Places like Hong Kong, for example, are maxed out, but Kuala Lumpur, I believe, you still have space to grow.
We have space in Kuala Lumpur, and very interestingly, we have very valuable slots in nearly all the places where you can make money. We just don't have enough A330s right now today to operate them. So we used to operate 330s or 777s to Hong Kong every day. We downsized to 737s. Now they're packed full. So there ain't no more slots in Hong Kong, in Bangkok, in Jakarta, in Singapore, in many places where you can, in India, many places where you can make money. We have got the slots. We're going to put in place the right equipment over the next 24 months where we'll be able to grow into that. At a minimal risk, we'll get the leases at a good price, I believe, and we'll probably make very good money out of flying to these places. So for me, in a selfish way, the lack of capacity and slot availability at some of these places actually suits me, because I can upgauge my equipment, use the slot better and make more money out of it. And we do see opportunities then to go to the secondary cities in China, and that's probably where and some of the secondary cities in India, and I believe we will have some good profitable growth in those places over the next 5 years.
And just a broader question on tourism. I mean, in many respects you've answered it, but the role of Malaysian Airlines as a catalyst and enabler of tourism more broadly, is that something you talk about? You mentioned you'd been to the stand.
Yeah.
Is that something implicit
I
in what
think
you
it's
do?
something that I personally need to take more seriously, and as a company we need to take a responsibility around that. I think if we leverage our position, we have a website that's got the third largest number of visitors of any Malaysian website. We have almost no content about the country up there at the moment. So we're going to do that and put that in place, and I think that'll make a significant difference and help to the promotion of the country. But that's something we need to do.
Let's give the audience a chance to ask you some questions. Peter, if somebody would like to ask a question, to anybody want to touch on another topic with Peter? Yep. Just get the microphone. If you could just, I know who you are, but if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Hi, good afternoon, Peter. Dina Kamel from Bloomberg News.
Hi, Dina. How are you?
Hi, good, very well, thank you. Just to catch up on what you were saying earlier about your plans for leasing aircraft. You've said that you're interested in A330s, and you've also said in the past that you're interested in leasing 777s. Can you tell me a little bit about the update for that?
Yes, so next year we need about 6 to 8 wide-body aircraft. The market, the aircraft are available. We're in negotiations with people at the moment around that. We haven't quite got the pricing we like yet, but we think that'll come. And the market is relatively soft right now. A similar number the following year, because even if I ordered new aircraft now, I wouldn't get them for a couple of years anyway. And there's much better value out there right now in 6 or 7 year old second-hand aircraft, which we will refurbish with full lie flat beds and make a really nice product on board. We can get them at a price where we can redeploy them on Hong Kong and India and Bali and places, and I can make money with them overnight. Like it's a no-brainer. So then we'll have to start replacing our existing fleet of 15 A330s, and we'll have to allow for some growth. So before the end of this year, and hopefully a little bit earlier, we will need to do an order for new aircraft for delivery at the end of 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and to get the fleet back up, because if we take in aircraft next year, they'll be in a 4, 5, 6 year lease. They'll need to be replaced by new aircraft. So we'll probably need to order sometime this year 30, 35 wide-body aircraft for delivery between 19 and 24, 23, 24. And the options at the moment we're looking at is the 330neo and the Boeing 787-9. Dash-9's considerably more expensive, but there's benefits on fuel and maintenance cost, etc. And it's a super plane. So.
Thank you for clarifying that. Just to go back on follow up very quickly on the lease deal, where are you sourcing, or where are you looking to source some of these aircraft?
Sadly, for the world aviation business at the moment, the world is becoming awash with second-hand A330s becoming available either now or the end of this year or in 2018. There's a lot of aircraft have been grounded in the region here and close within 3-4 hours flying time of here. So there is aircraft becoming available.
Give me examples of specific countries or airlines from which you.
If you pick any of the airlines in the region, that they've all grounded equipment in the last 4 months. All of them. So I don't want to embarrass anybody, but they all have. So.
Any more questions from the audience for Peter? Peter, I've just got a couple to wrap up with you. I mean, you've been pretty modest so far, and I haven't. I've been remiss in not asking you. We talked about the success in driving load factors and traffic volume up, and you talked about the polarization between those who are price sensitive. But I know you've been investing a lot in the premium product too. Tell us a bit more about that quickly.
Yeah, in Malaysia and Asia, good food is very important, and our food was not of a good standard more than a year ago. It had declined, and there was no investment and lack of attention to detail on it. So I've become an expert on satays and mee goreng and nasi lemak and many wonderful and exotic dishes. And when you get it right, people really, really love it. And a lot of times now we're starting to get that stuff really right. We replaced, we put lie flat beds in all the A330s. The business has gone up out the door. People love that product. We've just redone all the IFE and the movies. We've scrubbed, cleaned and repaired and tidied up a lot of the aircraft. And we're just spending a lot of time on improving the customer experience. The lounges are all being upgraded at the moment. That'll happen through the course of this year. They'll be ready by October, November. So a lot of that product is being lifted. Thankfully, it's gone a bit better a bit earlier than I expected. I didn't think we'd reach these load factors or passenger numbers as fast as we can. So that gives you a certain level of confidence that you can keep doing this and taking on the bigger aircraft. But maybe our time is quite good. Maybe our timing's been quite good. Maybe we're going to landing in a good place with getting planes at the right price at the moment for once.
And in terms of financials, I know you don't publish detailed financial data, and obviously Kasana Investments, the state organisation, is your owner. but you're talking about, if things go in the right direction, possibly relisting in 2019.
Yeah. So we halved our budgeted loss last year. We should come in around half. We've a budgeted loss for this year, but we made a very good profit in December. We made money from January, February, March. We'd have lost money seasonally. So this year, some months we're going to up, some we're down. But we were budgeted to make a loss this year. We will do. Next year, across the year, we will be profitable. And the plan at the moment is that there's an appetite for the equity that we would relist on the local exchange in Kuala Lumpur in probably around March 2019. And that we set a date unusually for that, or I set the date, because it's a little bit like Usain Bolt always knew the date of the Olympics, and everything works back from the date of the listing. So we actually, everybody in the organisation, that's our Olympic Games, and everybody's moving all the planning around that to make that happen.
Peter, I think the clock has beaten us. I think our time is up. So thank you for taking the time to come up to Dubai today for your first appearance at the ATM. I hope we can get you back again in the future for a progress report. So, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Bellew, CEO of Malaysian Airlines. Thank you very much.